In Matthew's Gospel, we read, "When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless." I think it would be hard to imagine a more terrible thing than the fire which engulfed Grenfell Tower in London. But probably because this calamity took place not far away, in the kind of environment we understand because it is our kind of environment too, in a place where we thought that fire prevention matters would be good and buildings would be safe and that health and safety rules would be strong and observed, because these are exactly the things that we have trusted to keep us and our loved ones safe. I think that the awfulness of the Kensington fire has touched many people very deeply indeed. Seeing helpless people, seeing now homeless people, seeing people who do not yet know if parents or children or friends are safe or injured or dead, seeing people who are in the depths of grief. These have caused huge streams of compassion to well up. And people the length and breadth of the country have realized instinctively that the state can no longer be relied upon to meet such needs as have suddenly arisen in that district of North London. The state is no longer able to look after those people to whom such an awful event has happened. So people across the country, not just in London, but I saw something on Facebook saying that collection points had been set up as far away as Orkney, and a removal company was ready to transport stuff to London. People have taken matters into their own hands, and they've collected clothing and food and toiletries and bedding, and they've offered money from their own bank accounts and places to stay in their own homes. We've heard stories of people offering what they could, and of churches and mosques working together. In the accumulation of many little actions, many small acts of kindness and generosity, in the opening of many hearts and homes and church halls and mosques and community buildings, something great has been done. Sometimes it takes a shock to awaken action. We look back, and the statement issued by Her Majesty the Queen yesterday maybe clarifies this. But these shocks have been coming all too frequently. It was shock at the conditions faced by refugees coming to our continent of Europe, which has prompted so many churches and schools and individuals to give what they could to clothe and shelter people arriving among us. It is shock at the realization that so many people in our own towns and cities do not have enough food, which has prompted churches and others to set up food banks, and which has prompted ordinary people like you and like me to give and to keep on giving. Together, we have made and we continue to make a really big difference. The story from the Bible which Colin read to us, that story of Jesus from the New Testament, tells us something about the compassion Jesus felt. Compassion is something the Gospels often mention. Jesus saw people around him suffering. He knew that for every suffering person he saw, there were countless more, then as now. He knew that he personally could not reach every one of these suffering people. He could not relieve every sufferer. He could not meet every single need. But his purpose was never to do it alone. His purpose was to encourage others to join in his work. But look who he enlisted. Matthew lists the 12 disciples. He starts his list with 4 fishermen, ordinary working men, probably not that well educated, whom Jesus befriended on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Then a little later on in his list, he mentions Matthew and reminds us that he was a tax collector, a man who had spent a lifetime lining his own pockets at the expense of the poor and the powerless, and also at the expense of the oppressive state which he supposedly served. Then near the end of the list, there's Simon, a zealot. That title, zealot, identifying him with a Jewish revolutionary movement. Probably not a man who was always peaceful. And then, bringing up the rear, there's Judas, the one who would eventually betray Jesus. When you think about it, it's a pretty mixed bunch. Not exactly an elite team of highly skilled, well-qualified, experienced, skilled, reliable people. And yet, these are the people whom Jesus sent out to do his work, to do the things that he had been doing, to do the very things which are most important to God. There are, I think, at least 2 ways, probably many more, of responding to the list of actions which Jesus told his disciples to do. One is to regard these things as impossible, to respond with disbelief and say, we could never do that. We could never heal the sick or cast out demons or raise the dead. But to my mind, there's another way. And that way is to respond imaginatively. Not to get too tied down by the particularities, but to read this list of actions metaphorically rather than literally. The fact is, ordinary people do amazing things. I think we've seen that over these last few days in the response to the London Tower Block fire. And we have seen it in the response that has been made to people seeking refuge among us from the Middle East and from Africa. We've seen ordinary people doing amazing things in the response to the genuinely hungry people who live in our neighborhoods. And in the outrage at this terrible fact, being translated into practical action. And amazing things, seemingly impossible things, have been done and continue to be done through the actions of ordinary people, not least through ordinary church members moved to compassion, like Jesus. Previously incurable diseases are successfully tackled. And every time we give to cancer research or other charities like it, we are participating in that work. People are brought back from the brink of death. And every time we contribute to Christian Aid and other charities which work in famine relief, we participate in that work. In many places, not least here, the demons of political oppression and persecution and unjust laws are being overturned and banished, and those previously excluded from society and discriminated against are being given new life and new opportunities. And every time we have raised our voices in prayer and advocacy, we have contributed to that work. In all these things, God is working through his people, whether we know it or not, whether we feel it or not. God is working in all of us to meet and overcome human need. Alone, we'll never make much of a difference, but together, we'll do great things. Jesus sent out 12 unlikely people to do his work. Now, we are their heirs. We are following in the footsteps of Simon Peter, of Andrew, of James, of John, of Simon the Zealot, of Matthew the tax collector, even Judas Iscariot. Now, Jesus sends us out as he did them, with his blessing and in his power. Let's go. Amen.